Hi, welcome to Almost Cooperstown.
I'm Mark.
And this is Gordon, and we love talking about baseball.
This is Off-Season, episode number 5. We're going to talk about the Hall of Fame vote that comes up on January 21st.
It's really that soon? Wow.
Right. So it's been in the baseball news. There's lots of other news for quite some time. And this year on the ballot to get into the Hall of Fame, and we know the stipulations, you have to play 10 years. And so you could play 10 lousy years, and you're still going to be on the Hall of Fame ballot. But chances are, if you play 10 years, you were at least a decent enough player because you played 10 years.
Yeah, like you're not going to see too many guys where, like, really, that guy's on the ballot. Like, even looking at all of the first-year guys on here, I'm like, okay, yeah, all of these guys were decent players, certainly.
Right. So there's 25 players total on the ballot. Each writer, for the most part, or elector, I guess, gets to vote for 10 players. In order to stay on the ballot from one year to the next, let's say you're a first-year player, and there are a number of those this year, you have to receive at least 5% of the votes. So let me hear what you have to say about, some people don't vote for 10 people. Is there a reason to vote for 10, not to vote for 10? Do you think it matters?
I think you vote for the 10, up to the 10 best guys you believe. If there's more than 10, I'm sure that's happened in some years where, like, there's just, like, for whatever reason, there's a couple guys, like, there's, like, a couple first-year ballot kind of guys that push down some of the guys that normally would get in later on in the voting. So I think it's like you put the 10 best players, and if there's not 10 guys worthy, you don't put 10 in there.
Yeah, I feel like, you should vote for 10 because you don't want to. A lot of times you've seen guys get out there and they don't make it out of year one. They get 3% or 4% of the ballots because somebody named 7 guys and could have put them on 8, 9, or 10 and didn't.
Yeah, but like, how many of those guys actually really, like, how many guys got unfairly missed the Hall of Fame because they didn't get the right name?
There are some guys that had really good careers that never made it to year 2, and I think that's just really interesting that they couldn't even make it to year 2.
I think that's an interesting discussion in and of itself, but I don't think that's an argument for putting 10 guys on the ballot for the sake of putting 10 guys on the ballot.
Well, I think what I'm saying is you're reserving judgment on those lower ranked on your own mind players for another day. You're just like, okay, I don't think so, but I'm not willing to make that decision right now. I don't have to.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, so that's kind of it. So I think the best way to do it is to.
Wait. How many votes? What's the percentage you need to get into the Hall of Fame? It's pretty high, right?
75. Yeah, you got to be named on 75%. That was a good point. I should have said that. 75% of the ballots. So. We both have not disclosed to one another who should be on our ballots, and I think that it makes this hopefully a little bit more fun to sort of see how close we might be. I assume we'll be fairly close, but why don't we do that? And then at the end of this, why don't you pick 3 guys that if you said, okay, these are my top 3. You don't have to give them in order. You can if you want.
Top 3 in terms of what?
Who I just think, like if I had to pick 3 guys that could only be on my ballot, these would be my 3 guys.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I'll throw out a name first. And I think I went into this, and I'm not, as we had an episode previously about this, I'm not somebody that believes in the exclusion from the Hall of Fame due to steroids.
Okay.
So Bonds.
I feel I can, yeah. Okay, yeah, and he is on my ballot, and interestingly enough, I think I wrote it's stupid that he's not in already.
Yeah.
This is the 9th year on the ballot, so he's getting close to that time where if he doesn't get elected this year or next year,
then he goes to Veterans Committee, right?
Correct, and then it'll happen down the road. Or it won't. Anyway, he is been gaining in the ballots a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see because you have him there, I have him there, and I put Clemens. Also,
me too.
Right there.
It's just like
his 9th year on the ballot. Also,
yeah. I even put another 9th year guy on the ballot, Sammy Sosa.
Yeah,
because the way I'm looking at it with these players all retired in the same year, and when you look at all of these guys, they were competing against it's just they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. It just feels so puritanical to keep them out of there.
You bring up a really good point. That the idea of who you played with at that time really impacts your chances in the Hall of Fame. And Bill James writes about this. Jay Jaffe writes about this. In fact, James did something the other day, I think, about Gil Hodges, who came up. And he's not in the Hall of Fame, had 370 home runs, won 3 Gold Gloves, was a great guy, good player, had a 273 career average. And I thought, well, okay, so maybe that's why. And then he said, well, they didn't have the Gold Glove when Gil Hodges came up. They didn't start until he was 33. So he won 3 Gold Gloves after he was 33. 33. So you figure he could have won a bunch in that time beforehand, because he certainly wasn't any worse. His career, if he has 9 Gold Gloves, for instance, looks like Scott Rowland.
And you made this point because we talked about this the other day. Like, you had, I mean, what if you're the American League third baseman when Brooks Robinson's playing?
Right.
Like,
right.
Okay, congratulations. You will never get a Gold Glove unless he just misses a season.
Right. Nettles finally run his Gold Gloves when Brooks stopped playing, and he's a really terrific almost guy. Mm-hmm. I think we'd both agree, but he didn't even get a sniff.
And okay, here, I'll use this to go into another one. Here's a guy, because he was the best fielder, I think he should be in, because he won 9 straight Gold Gloves at shortstop before going on to win 2 more for a total of 11 later in his career, and that's Omar Vizquel.
Yeah, Vizquel is not on my ballot.
I think Vizquel should be in there.
Yeah, I when you play against your peers and all that, and you're rated, I just didn't even feel he was like the top 1 or 2 shortstops in his own league when he played.
Well,
there were always guys that were better.
Unfortunately for him, he came up and was an established player, so he was probably the best shortstop in the American League until about 1995.
Defensively,
right?
Never close.
Well, before 95, when you had the emergence of all of a sudden, hey, what if shortstops could hit? Like, before Jeter and A-Rod and all those guys showed up,
Tejada.
Yeah, he was probably
Garciaparra.
the best shortstop in the American League, because defense was so much more valued
in the traditional shortstop way.
And he was not an awful offensive player, not a good one, but he was not a complete detriment.
He didn't improve in my mind as much as a hitter as did Ozzie Smith, who obviously is in the Hall of Fame.
That's certainly
and
fair.
That to me is a dividing line as well. So very interesting.
But he was unquestionably, and you to say that, like, oh, unfortunately you weren't Jeter or A-Rod offensively when you were still better than all of those guys defensively, I feel like that should count. Another guy that shortstop wise I would compare. So Campaneris played for the A's before your time, and Luis Aparicio played for the White Sox back in the 50s. Important only in that one is in Aparicio, one is not Campaneris, and their career stats are almost identical. That might just come down to politics.
Well, and the real point that was made is that when Aparicio stole lots of bases in the 50s, nobody had been stealing bases for 35 years. So in the minds of the public, because this guy began to do something that wasn't done, he was the precursor to Wills and Brock and Ricky Henderson.
And certainly stealing bases before everybody else does make you stand out way more than another guy that did all the same things as you, except for that.
But Campaneris could never win a Gold Glove because Aparicio is winning the Gold Gloves. But it was just interesting because when you play and who you're compared to and all that really is important. So Vizquel, I'm dinging him for what I said shouldn't be dingable, which is, he just wasn't even the third best shortstop.
Yeah, unfortunately, you just happened to also play at a time where American League was filled with titans at shortstop.
So there's another 9-year guy that, listen, I can't stand this guy.
Yeah, speaking of politics.
Can't stand him, but I think we feel the same in that we're going to rate these guys on their contributions to baseball when they played also, right? So in Curt Schilling's case, he wasn't nearly as controversial a person during his playing career.
I don't remember really anything. I think there was some things towards the end, but I never remember it being a big deal.
Not certainly to not that degree, if you will. So he is also in his 9th year. He has been gaining some strength, in the voting. And it'll be very interesting, particularly given some of his more recent comments, how much that affects.
I think the things that would help him is when you look at this overall class, he actually feels near the top of it in terms of overall what he did as a player.
Right. So
I think that's a big deal, is that, like, he's not competing against some of these guys that he's had to compete against these last few seasons where you've had pretty monstrous dudes get in.
He compares in his win-loss record, which we both agree is overrated and less important today than it's been, almost ever.
But not as much when he was pitching.
Not as much. It meant more than. So Andy Pettitte, had a similar one loss in his career and was a great postseason pitcher. Had just really a lot of success.
But he never felt dominant.
We agree. But then you put in the 3,100 strikeouts, for Schilling, and his career 1.13 WHIP. Pettitte's nowhere near that.
Yeah,
and then he just pulls away and leaves him.
Where it's dust. Like you kind of look at Pettitte and you go, the other thing is Pettit played for the Yankees for his whole career when they were at the height of their dynasty.
Wasn't ever the number one pitcher on his own team.
Right. Schilling played for those awful Philly teams. Those teams in the 90s.
That was before he really became what he
But he was
became.
a good pitcher for them. And so here, like, think about if you put Curt Schilling on the Yankees for his entire career. I bet his numbers look a lot better.
I think that's probably true. So those are the four, right? Sosa, Bonds, Schilling, and Clemens, the four guys in their ninth year. So next year, if they don't get in this year, would be their last year of eligibility, and then they go into
and I have all of them as those would probably be outside of one more guy. There's one more guy that I think is equal to them in terms of they would be my top 5 to get in, and that's Manny.
Yep, same.
Manny's career numbers, when you really look at them, are nuts.
I think I wrote one of the greatest right-hand hitters of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys that hit 312 for their career with 555 career homers belong in the Hall of Fame.
Like that's like he was a guy that hit for average and power in a way that very few guys have.
And we all kind of remember Manny as a guy who had the bottle of water in his back pocket in left field at Fenway, probably taking a swig during the inning. But what I thought was interesting, and I took a look at that, he only played 332 of his 1,939 games as a designated hitter. I thought it would have been a lot higher.
No, he played the field.
He played the outfield. He went out there.
Yeah, he was out there. It didn't get bad. I remember it wasn't awful until he got to the Dodgers. That's when the defense really had fallen away.
He just seemed disinterested a lot of times in defense.
But like he seemed disinterested in the game sometimes. Like,
okay, so who else? Anybody else in your
in?
Yeah.
I got a third baseman.
I think I can guess who this is.
Yeah,
we just talked
we've
about him.
talked about him a lot, and that's Scott Rowland.
Yeah. He's on my my book too. 9 Gold Gloves, as we said, 316 home runs, 281 career average, but a 364 on base average. Yeah,
like that means he was a really good hitter, a fantastic defender, one of the best, if not the best, third baseman for a bunch of years in the National
League. And
League.
Here's how it kind of comes that, I don't always feel the same way years later. I don't think I was as strongly in favor of Rowland when we started this whole process. The more I looked at his statistics and his career
statistics, it's impressive. And here's a guy where I think it's like, his career statistics are impressive in a certain way, given the position he played. But I have him as being in, but I don't think he'll get in the long run, interestingly. And that's Andrew Jones.
I have him in also. He's got my vote. I put him as arguably the best fielding center fielder ever. That's a tall statement. And
That's
Willie
a
Mays
tall statement.
Willie Mays, who is now the oldest living Hall of Famer.
That's interesting.
At 89 years old. 434 career home runs and a great fielding center fielder. I could just leave it there. That's enough. He did steal a bunch of bases, particularly early in his career.
But not a truly meaningful amount.
But what really dings him is the 337 on base average for a career.
What was his career?
254 for his career.
And then there were some years near the end where it got bad. And even when he was at his height of his career, he's never a particularly high average guy.
So because we think there should be more guys in, and I put out a tweet this week saying at one point, I think 4% or 5% of all Major League Baseball players have made it to the Hall of Fame. In basketball, it's 4% of the players that have played have made it to the Hall of Fame. There's certainly room to put some more guys in. There's 19,000 guys who played Major League Baseball.
So wait, you said 0.4 or
1.4?
Okay, 1.4.
So there's 233 players.
Yeah, you could stand to expand it a little bit more.
Andrew
4%
Jones
sounds about, if you're working with an expanded Hall of Fame, Andrew Jones definitely belongs in there.
But prior to this, I think I started thinking, well, Jim Edmonds, if you're going to put Andrew Jones in there, you got to put Jim Edmonds in there too. Another great defensive center fielder, contributed,
who was
arguably
player. A better hitter.
Absolutely, I think in terms of an all-around hitter.
All-around hitter. He didn't have quite as much, but though he did have some years
390 home runs.
Yeah. So he was close. Like, he had about the same amount of power and won a bunch of Gold Gloves, and even won some Gold Gloves while he was competing against Jones in the center field.
Right. So making Jones wait, I guess, is okay, but because they've made Whitaker wait, we believe that he should be in, and Grich. And I won't even put him in there because I don't think he should be in, but there'll be another guy I'm going to talk about who's sort of in that category, who did one side of it very well, but maybe didn't do the other side. Either you didn't like Vizquel, didn't hit well enough to overcome, in my opinion. You think it's okay.
Wait, so who are you talking about?
Oh, I'm talking about who isn't in, but I want to save that.
Okay, save him. Okay,
I still have a couple more guys.
So after Andrew, I think I have one. We have two more left, right?
I have 3 more that we haven't talked about.
All right, because I had Vizquel. So that
Right,
was
you have
why.
Vizquel, so that's
I
why.
have 2 more. So it's going to be interesting to see what the difference is.
You'll be able to guess, I think.
So, okay, one more that I think is pretty obvious, and he's a guy that is getting later into his ballot now, I think, because he's been retired for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Sheffield.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that. Yeah, and I've come around on him too and put him in.
The problem for him is he's a lesser version of Manny in my mind.
Oh, that's a good comparison. Yes, I don't know if it's lesser. Actually, yeah. Only because Manny hit 312 for his career.
And he hit more home runs.
So Sheffield had a good career average, but it wasn't 300.
Mm-hmm.
He hit 500 home runs. Mm-hmm. So, that's pretty. He averaged 117 games a season for his career, which was higher than I would have for a guy that I always thought was injured all the time.
He felt injured all the time.
Right. He played 137 games for the Mets in his last year. 130. They threw that guy out there 137 times in the field. He was, deep into his 30s at that point and still could hit the ball. So he was a feared hitter in the lineup. When you think about watching him play, the same way Manny was, like he was coming up in the lineup.
You were nervous. You always had to be aware of where Gary Sheffield was in the lineup.
Yeah, and he was the primary hitter. He would come to your team. He'd be your cleanup hitter. Mm-hmm. Wherever he went, he'd be your cleanup hitter.
And it was very mercenary in that way. He played for a lot of teams.
He was a guy that the teams didn't like, but they wanted him on their team to hit.
It's the kind of guy where it's just like you're willing to put up with the attitude, but only for so long.
I don't even know if that's a fair, to say attitude. I think he, who knows?
The personality.
Yeah. He definitely got dinged or the lack thereof.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, just like, it's not like I don't know because I haven't looked into that much, but it's not like you hear a lot of ex-teammates of Gary Sheffield coming out passionately for how great a teammate he was.
No, but that certainly isn't
not many guys.
Reason why you're going to vote a guy in the Hall of Fame or not.
No. But that's that might lead to why he was a bit more of a mercenary than a guy like Manny, who spent most of his career with, I think, 3 teams.
Okay, so you've got another one, and then I guess I'll get to throw the one that you didn't.
So it's interesting. I'm not sure who the other guy on this list, because in my mind it could be a couple, though I think I probably have it narrowed down now, though it could be one of a couple guys. My last guy, I think, should get in, and honestly, I'd have it's just like I'd have him in there probably sooner than some of the other guys, is Helton.
Yeah, well, I have Helton in there too. And the home away splits, listen, if you're going to evaluate Helton, that's going to where you're going to go first, right? Because he hits so much better at Coors Field, or whatever it was called then. I guess it was Coors Field.
It's always been Coors Field.
Yeah. He hits so much better at home. He batted about 350 at home. He batted about 280 or so on the road. That really, but the Gold Gloves for me, the 3 Gold Gloves, and the overall career stats are consistent. He was always right there, and he's a winning ball player, so he gets in on my ballot too.
And he got to the World Series once. They lost, but he got to be there. So, and he was he was the Rockies' best player for who knows how long.
Until Larry Walker got there?
Well, no, after Larry Walker, because Larry Walker retired when?
I don't know, actually. I will have to.
And I don't think he ended his career. Did he end his career?
He didn't end his career as a Rocky. No, he went elsewhere.
He went elsewhere. I just think that the home runs, the defense, the average, he was probably the best first baseman in the NL for a long time.
Yeah, certainly, if you looked at the both sides of his game, he had the best combination of offense and defense at first base. Olerud was a pretty good hitter and a pretty good defender. It wasn't the power play, and certainly is not. I'm not advocating him as a Hall of Famer. He didn't even play in the NL
for that long, because he only played for the Mets for like a season or two, I think.
Yeah, just a few seasons. Okay, so my guy actually did play for the Mets.
Okay, then. Okay, that could be
so both guys you're thinking.
No, it could be one of 3 guys actually.
Exactly. So, and he is in his 6th year.
Okay.
And his claim is that against him is that he's got the fewest innings for a relief pitcher. And he's only.
That was actually one of the reasons why I didn't have him on my ballot.
But I think the bias against Billy Wagner is that he was around when Mariano Rivera was around, and you can't. The guy's success was really high, and his performance was great. I think he gets
a couple
dinged.
things that, for me, looking at Billy Wagner, that kind of
didn't lead the Mets to a World Series.
It didn't help. I don't know if he was on. That was not a big.
Which is true.
Which is true. He didn't help. He didn't help there, but he never had 50 saves in a season.
When it was important.
When it was important.
Does that speak more for the teams he played on or for the kind of pitcher he was?
It was just interesting.
And by the way, against my point, guys have saved more games than that and not been on great teams.
Yeah, exactly. And coupled with the fact that he threw so few innings.
Yeah, I think that was just a product of the time. I mean,
that you only would use him in the ninth.
That was
if you
the
had
way.
a
That
save
was the style that they did. If were he to pitch today, they probably wouldn't use him that way.
No, he would probably pitch more often. But like that hurts him. Like there was when you look at his career statistics, he felt like a compiler to me.
To me, I think he was a better relief pitcher than Trevor Hoffman.
Didn't Hoffman get a Cy Young?
Maybe.
Let me look, because that would be a
maybe.
If he did,
that doesn't mean it was well. Okay, just because he got a Cy Young, I'm not sure that pushes it over the top for me. But I hear what you're saying.
I mean, I think that matters.
Yeah.
That might make the difference. And he was also Trevor Hoffman was what? How many saves? Hoffman had like
over 600.
Yeah, Wagner I don't think was close.
No, Wagner has 400 saves or so.
And he was doing it in the NL with a worse team on a pretty consistent basis.
Yeah,
those Padre teams were not great.
So if you had to stack those two guys up, right? You've got Vizquel and I've got Wagner. I'd still take Wagner.
Yeah, I think it comes down to. I think Vizquel was more of a standout out of his position than Wagner was.
That's an interesting point. Only because calling a relief pitcher is such a weird thing to have it be.
Wagner, because it wasn't that he was getting punished for pitching at the same time as Mariano Rivera. He was getting punished for also pitching at the same time as Trevor Hoffman. So now you're talking him about being the third best closer.
Yeah,
and Vizquel was still unquestionably the best defensive shortstop.
Yeah, I still feel like Wagner as a relief pitcher was somebody who concerned me maybe more than Trevor Hoffman. Maybe that's a bias on Hoffman because his outpitch wasn't a fastball, and I have a problem with that.
You also have the problem with that because every time you probably watch Trevor Hoffman pitch, you got John Franco flashbacks.
Oh, please. So the guy that I didn't pick, and you know who it would be then, who also he came up with. I think he came up with the Mets.
Well, there's actually two guys I thought of could have been, and they both did play for the Mets.
And that is Jeff Kent.
Yep, that was one of them.
So many people are so pro on Jeff Kent, and obviously when he played for the Mets those few years, he looked like he might be a decent player, and then he left the team before he ever really.
And then he went to the Giants, and he got an
MVP,
player.
And he's got 377 career home runs at second base. Solid hitter. Some people would argue that he is a better fielder than I think. I thought he was not a good fielder at all.
I don't remember
below
him
average.
being a good fielder.
No, not a good, just below average. And again, it goes back to this is his 8th year of eligibility, and it just bugs me that Whitaker and Gritch, who I think were better players than Jeff Kent, aren't in, and he's going to get in now. And then what happens to guys like that who
probably should be in over him because they were doing approximately the same things as him at a time when their competition wasn't doing anything close to that.
So he's got 2 more years on the ballot, so I figure I don't have to worry about. This is why I'm going to vote for 10. I'll just punt to next year and see. Maybe next year I'll say yes.
Now there was another guy that played for the Mets that I did think it could have been,
and that is
Abreu.
Oh, so brief. I don't even think of him as a Met.
He did play for the Mets, though.
That's the proverbial cup of coffee there.
Yeah, he did.
Yes, he is only in his 2nd year, and he too is in my 2nd tier list, if you will.
Yeah, So Kent.
Vizquel was there too.
So Kent, Wagner, and Abreu are kind of all in my 2nd tier. There's one more name I have as there.
I have Pettit there too.
Me too.
Yeah, you got to give the Yankee fans, because they'll
like
kill
Pettit,
us,
again. I know I was kind of talking trash on Pettit when we were going over Kurt Schilling, and it's not that Pettit was bad. It's just certainly compared to the rest of the guys that I would take every single guy and Billy Wagner before I would take Pettit.
Yeah, and it's only his 2nd year, so again, I don't have to
kind of punt.
I don't have to worry about it. Although if we don't put him on our ballots and he gets less than 5%,
he could be in
by
trouble.
Andy Pettit.
Yep.
So I would say that he will remain on the ballot. He'll get named on enough
ballots. He'll be
fine.
Honestly, I think everybody that's been over 2 will be okay.
Yeah, I think all the guys we have on there,
all of them will get carried to next year. I think the more interesting discussion is with all the guys that are on their 1st year of the ballot.
And there's quite a few of them.
I think it's really down to, it's kind of like the culling of the baby turtles. I don't think many of these guys are surviving.
So I'll go down the list and you tell me yes or no.
Okay.
In terms of you think his long-term prospects to be in the Hall of Fame, he's not going to get in this year.
Well,
and we're not voting for him.
I think it's even more interesting. Does he remain on the ballot?
Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
That's even better.
That's even better.
That's even better. Okay, number one guy, Tim Hudson.
Yes, he remains on the ballot. I don't think he'll get in because when you look at his career numbers, he just seems like he was a really good pitcher. There's not a lot there to support him being a Hall of Famer.
I think his good fortune was to play for a lot of good teams.
Yeah, there's not a lot of dominant Tim Hudson seasons.
So
as a collective whole,
he's in there. 1.24 career WHIP. That's right there. You know, that's in the ballparks, literally. Mark Burley.
I think he survives.
Yeah, I think he's like Tim Hudson.
Yeah. He didn't play for as good of teams, though, because outside of that little stretch where the White Sox were really good and like the middle aughts, they weren't great for the most part.
He only got a Cy Young vote one time. 5th.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, Tim Hudson got finished second one time early in his career.
Did he get a Rookie of the Year, too?
I know he was very good in his rookie year. I don't think he was a Rookie of the Year, though. And Burley had the 1.28 career WHIP. So very similar to didn't have 2,000 career strikeouts. Burley won 4 Gold Gloves. Now let's talk about pitcher Gold Gloves right now. Don't mean that much to me.
No, they mean relatively little.
Says what does the pitcher say?
They mean relatively little.
Okay.
Because unfortunately for you, your entire game is also on that side of the field. So and you field so relatively few balls as the pitcher that the number of outs you're making in a singular season is really low compared to like any other position player.
You could be Greg Maddux and have a Hall of Fame career, and the guy was a Gold Glove pitcher too. That's nice.
It would almost be more meaningful if you were a good hitter.
Yeah, well, when it used to mean something, certainly.
Right. Now it might not mean anything at all because you literally don't get to hit.
Okay, how about Torrey Hunter?
Yes.
Wow, okay, that was strong. And I would put him into the Kenny Lofton conversation.
Like, he's actually, of the guys we've named so far, I think he's got the best chance of getting it.
I'd say I would say so too. Again, it bugs me that Kenny Lofton's not in the Hall of Fame.
Because Hunter was unquestionably the best center fielder for a couple years.
In the league, yes.
Yeah. Like, he was an unbelievable fielder.
On good teams.
On good teams. He was the star of those Twins
teams.
and
Angels, right?
Mostly the Twins, his best season. But he did go and play good seasons for the Angels.
Yeah, absolutely. A pitcher that, you'll know, Dan Herron.
I don't think he makes it past a season. I don't think he gets 5%.
His career 1.18 WHIP surprised me because that's a good pitcher.
That's better than you would think.
Right.
Yeah.
153 and 131 1-loss record. So that's pretty good too. Nothing else remarkable though about his other than this is a good pitcher. He's an almost guy.
Yeah.
How about another pitcher, Barry Zito? First year on the ballot. All these guys are first year.
I think he might be able to float to another year, but I don't think he's got any shot at getting in.
So much like Herron, his career 1-loss record is 154 and 143. So, 1,800 Ks, so he didn't get 2,000 Ks for what that's worth. His career WHIP is 1.34. That's really kind of high for a Hall of Fame pitcher.
He had a lot of bad seasons.
So he was a decent postseason pitcher and actually pitched. He was 6-3 overall in the postseason and pitched well for the Giants when they won the series in 12. No, I don't think he's going to last. And another Trojan, by the way. So I would vote for him on that basis, but he had a great curveball. That was the most dynamic thing about Barry Zito. He had a really pretty curveball.
It was
fun
really
to watch.
pretty.
Yeah.
Huge, big breaking lefty curveball.
Reminds me of Kershaw's curveball a little bit. How about Aramis Ramirez, first year on the ballot?
Honestly, I have to look at his career statistics because I have a feeling they'd be better than I would think.
283 career average, 386 home runs, 3-time All-Star selection in 18 seasons.
The problem for him is that he exists in a world where Scott Rowland exists. And if Scott Rowland is a borderline Hall of Famer, then Erasmus Ramirez isn't even close.
And I'm forgetting other third basemen that he played with, but there was never a time in my mind where I thought he was even the second best third baseman in the National League.
There was like a couple year period
nice years
where he
was
in the conversation.
Yeah, and I guess that's how you make 3 All-Star teams. You're probably at least one of the 2 best, but I should know more about who his contemporaries were, than I do. Here's another guy, the Flying Hawaiian, Shane Victorino. No.
He's a guy that played 10 seasons, but I don't think he will make it 1 on the ballot.
He won 4 Gold Gloves as a center fielder. So actually, that's better. He had a great nickname too.
Great nickname, and that's actually very impressive. You know, I wouldn't have thought that 4 Gold Gloves, like, and there was a couple years where he was really good for the Phillies and the Red Sox, right?
The Phillies, Red Sox. I'm trying to think where else he played, but he was a playoff guy. He was became sort of a mercenary later in his career.
Yeah, but he was good. I do remember him being very good for those Phillies and Red Sox teams for a couple seasons. But Hall of Famer, he's a Hall of very good.
Now he did try his hand at boxing, or both of his hands, as it were. Didn't go too well, and he kind of gave that up. But that was at the end of his playing career.
You know what? Good on him.
AJ Burnett.
No.
Walked a lot of guys.
He was the pitcher AJ Burnett could have been was a Hall of Fame.
Drafted by, you guessed it, the
Mets.
New York Mets.
Because he had the stuff to be a Hall of Fame.
2,500 career strikeouts. That really surprised me. That's a lot of strikeouts.
Because of all those guys, of that whole Beckett, Burnett, and whoever, I think it was Pavana was the other one, that like 3-headed monster the Marlins had that one season.
Local boy here.
Burnett pitched the longest.
Yeah. He and didn't he have like one weird no-hitter or something like that?
Yeah, we locked like 9 guys.
Yes, exactly. 2 more guys that I've got that are on the ballot this year. And he's not on either of our lists, I'm going to guess. Nick Swisher.
No.
So the best thing you can say is he had a nice on-base average for his career of 351, and I would say that he was better than his dad. His dad, Steve Swisher, was a catcher for the Giants back in the 60s, and he was let's just say a professional baseball player and that played Major League Baseball.
You know what? He was good enough to be a major leaguer.
Yeah, exactly. So
but yeah, no, Nick Swisher, good guy, played a bunch of seasons, not a Hall of Famer.
There's 2 more guys left. LaTroy Hawkins is now eligible for the Hall of Fame.
I'd have to look at his career numbers because I bet they're weirdly better than you would think, but I doubt it.
I don't think so, actually.
I doubt it. Yeah. I doubt it.
He played 21 years.
He might make it an extra season on the ballot just because relievers that pitch for that long are unusual. So like he might get kind of floated a little bit extra just because of that, but I don't think he's a Hall of Famer.
When I look at his career, I wrote down the only player named LaTroy ever to play Major League Baseball.
Well, I mean, now you have to give it to him.
And he played 21 mostly unremarkable seasons. That's his career. And were he sitting here with us right now, I would say, I looked at like there was like nothing in the Baseball Reference Guide like that where he did anything at the end of the year, like he finished 3rd in this or 2nd in that.
He just pitched for 21 seasons.
They just ran the guy out there. And the last guy did one of the classiest things actually I've seen in recent years done. He ended his career with the Mets, and he was owed a lot of money by the Mets, and he retired even though he could have taken the money and got guaranteed a couple of $1 million, and he retired so the Mets wouldn't have to use that against their payroll. And that's Michael Kadire.
He had a couple really good seasons, but he's not a Hall of Famer.
So Michael Kadire at least won the NL batting title.
The NL?
Correct.
For who?
For Colorado.
For Colorado.
He hit 311 in 2013. 331. 331.
Okay. Yeah, 311.
Sorry, 331 in 2013. And the next year, he didn't win the title. He hit 332. And the year after that, he went to the Mets and didn't do very much at all, and then his career was over.
Yeah, I remember that. That was not. We all very
excited. Nice player, liked him. Good with the Twins, by the way.
Couple good seasons for the Twins. Yeah. I think he finished up there in the MVP voting one season, but he wasn't even the best guy on his team.
Not even close, actually. But again, a nice
his teammate might get it.
Baseball player, a guy also probably interesting to talk to because I've heard him speak a few times.
Kadire's teammate that was better than him, and Joe Mauer. He might be a Hall of Famer.
Oh, I think so. And there was a time when Joe Mauer was on a track to be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah. But then as he stopped hitting quite as much.
Yeah, he just was injured.
And he got injured because, there was a period where he would have been.
As a catcher, what he was doing offensively was really
while being an unbelievably good defensive catcher.
So let's kind of wrap this up. And what, if you have 3 guys, if that's even fair to say, and they're probably going to be the same 3. I don't know.
Three guys. I narrowed it down to 5. Clemens, Bonds, Manny.
Me too. I thought about Schilling.
It would be Schilling,
but I can wait one more year for Schilling.
To me, it's more Manny deserves it.
Yeah,
really. To me, Manny because like unlike all those other guys, the controversy around, because Manny was he was a steroid guy, right? He got knocked for it, or was it he was just PEDs? It wasn't steroids.
No, they accused him of being on steroids,
but they had less on him than like I felt like that his stuck even less than like Ortiz's.
They really don't have anything on anybody, really.
But I remember I remember the amount of allegations like they got A-Rod. And they pretty much got Bonds. Like we know Bonds did it.
Didn't admit it, these guys never admitted it, but yes. But they also...
I just don't remember the same preponderance of evidence against Manny, and I don't remember it being as big a story against him as it was the other guys.
Right. So, and I think,
But that could just be me not remembering.
In his case, he was just the best right-handed hitter in the game, and that, probably as much as 50% of the players were doing steroids at the time and everybody's doing it. So that's my number one reason for saying if you don't know who was doing it and who wasn't doing it, then put that aside and how do they perform?
Yeah, and he was the best right-handed hitter.
So, yeah, and we'll let Schilling wait until next year.
But Schilling should be in too.
Yeah.
Forget what he says. Forget that he says crazy stuff on Twitter. Forget that he made a very bad video game.
Yeah,
he was a Hall of Fame pitcher.
There are a lot of voters, writers that really feel that their conduct, weighs heavily on their voting, and I think that's something that the Hall of Fame itself has to deal with in terms of how it's going to be evaluated, because this is going to keep happening. It always has.
Here's the thing: I think you should start putting them, because the last thing you want is suddenly people starting to go, "Hey, let's take a look at these historical baseball players
retroactively
live and decide whether they belong in there," because I'm sure there are a lot of guys that had some rather unkind things to say about women and minorities that played back in the 20s and 30s. And the last thing we need is deciding, hey, maybe Ty Cobb doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame.
Or whoever it is. Nap Lajoie was another guy.
There's a lot of guys that probably did a lot of backward stuff. So saying that Curt Schilling has expressed some distasteful political views, now put him in there. He's
and we talk about it. The idea is to talk about it and say this guy ended up, but he's still in the Hall of Fame. If you want to say that's infamy, that's part of it.
And to me, also, he never did any of that stuff when he was representing Major League Baseball.
Right.
And you shouldn't be unless you did something so it would be different if he killed a guy. Okay, yeah, maybe if you murder somebody, you don't get to be in the Hall of Fame. But that's not what happened here.
So we'll see by the time this show drops and we do our next show, the votes will have come out. So we'll tabulate, see how well we did.
We'll do a little comparison and see, because I doubt 10 will get in. And as we get here in, the middle of our off-season episodes, we did just want to take a moment out of here to thank all of our listeners as we're approaching, 1,000 listens, which is, for us, just kind of starting this as something fun to do once a weekend.
More than we ever imagined.
Yeah, we are over the moon with that. And so we just did want to first reach out and thank everybody that does listen to this at all. Just it's awesome that you do and you take the time out. But of course, we'd love to hear from anybody that, is listening to the podcast. If you have any questions or topic ideas, we'd love for, you to share them with us, and you can share them us at our email at
almostcooperstown@gmail.com. You can also send us a message at almostcoop on Twitter, and we actually have a Facebook page for anybody that's still on Facebook at Almost Cooperstown. So send in what you're thinking. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform.
And you can follow us on Twitter at almostcoop.